Hello.
Hi, Julie.
How are you? So, people watching at 49th Shelf, this is the author of How to Get a Girl Pregnant, Karleen Pendleton Jiménez. And this is an incredible memoir from Tightrope Books. And I don't want to ruin the spoiler. You do have a child. I
I
think
do.
it's safe to say. But you know what I love about the title? It's one of those titles that it feels sort of like a how-to, obviously how-to, but once you finish it, you really get how tongue-in-cheek it is, because we really do have this sort of like, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes the baby and the baby carriage. And we know that it's not actually just that easy for many, many people to get pregnant, but I don't think we realize just how hard it can be to get pregnant. So I wanted to ask you, I suppose, first, did you even know, did you have any suspicion that you would write a memoir, or did you find yourself as a writer just in the middle of this life experience that had to be documented?
I think a bit of both. I started writing notes because just in my diary, because that's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
To whatever I'm doing in my life, to not feel alone and to feel, I don't know, it feels good to write. And then, but as I was kind of going through some of these processes, the stories are so weird. It's kind of sci-fi and. Um, odd. And I would tell, at least, I didn't talk to very many people, but
Mm-hmm.
even in the few people that I told, everybody was like, oh, I really hope you're writing this down, because nobody, well, maybe they had experienced it, but they didn't feel like a lot of people were talking about this stuff. And still, I have people all the time that come to me, especially dealing with any kind of fertility. Mostly straight identified women, because that's who's mostly getting pregnant, and they feel like they can't talk to anybody about the clinics, or about their desires, or about their hunger, or about their sadness, and it's so intense. And nobody's talking. So I think, well, when nobody's talking, you need to write it down and connect in some other way.
Well, and I think it's interesting, because I was saying before we started recording that this is it's a very unique story, and it's a very unique perspective, or sorry, not unique, singular. It's very personal, and yet for having read it, and the people I know who have read it, across ranges of age and sexual identity, that sort of experience of what it feels like to want to be pregnant, to want to have a baby so badly, is absolutely pervasive and universal. But when you were talking about how, a lot of women, how alone they feel, talk about being a butch identified woman, because you mentioned a conversation you have with an acquaintance who says, it's the femmes who are supposed to have the children. You also, there's a great scene where you're picking up it almost sounds like a toolbox of sperm, and you encounter a security guard who's known to you, and this sort of this sort of like, this fear that you had, that you didn't necessarily want to be outed as a butch woman who was trying to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And I guess, and how alone that was, lonely,
No,
yeah.
but it was very hard for me, and I don't like. There have been butches that have gotten pregnant forever
Yeah.
through history. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
there have been F to M guys, trans guys that have gotten pregnant. So I'm not trying to say it's like this new thing or anything like that, but I still think that it's pretty rare, and that we can have a lot of sexism within our community, and we're so, I don't know, kind of hungry to hold on to our butch identity and to not have that taken away from us, to be tough, to be strong, and to not be belittled or in that way. And unfortunately, sometimes when things are perceived to be feminine, that's perceived as a belittling. Often because, this wasn't necessarily true for me, but for a lot of people, forced into dresses, forced to do feminine things their whole lives, and they had to fight their heart out to be able to claim a masculine identity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they're going to hold on to it. We're going to hold on to it. And so then getting pregnant, some people see that as a really feminine act. I have to say I didn't really see it that way. It didn't feel very feminine. I don't know. It was a pretty, intense, heavy, blood, sweat, and tears kind of process. So, but anyway, a lot of people see it that way, and so it can be seen as shameful or, a belittling of my butch identity. And I don't know. I thought if I had the baby, I wasn't going to let that keep me in the way of getting a baby. Mm-hmm. But I thought if I had the baby, well, and if I'm pregnant, then I'm going to deal with that when that happens, when I get kind of criticized for that. And that's what I decided to do. And I would say for the most part, a lot of the response from butches has been very positive. And, even butches, they have no idea. This one person said to me, "Oh, I love your book. It's great. It's perfect. It's what I need." And I said, "Oh, do you want to get pregnant?" Or she said, "Oh, hell no. I'm not going to get pregnant." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." But I think what it was is it's the larger issue of how kind of this identity can trap us and limit what we think we can do, or add fear to what we think we could do. So butches are reading it and going, okay, maybe they don't want to get pregnant, but what does this mean about if I want to do a feminine thing and here or there? Is that the end of me? Am I allowed to?
Right.
This fuller person, and hopefully more broadly than that, because I think all of us are trapped in some kind of identity. I mean, identities often are the source of comfort and reassurance, and that we feel really good with them, and that's why I like them. But on the other hand, sometimes we can get trapped, right? So
we'll talk a bit about. There's a wonderful scene where you're in the clinic and you have there's a technician, and if I remember correctly, I don't think it was the usual doctor, and you make the point of saying that like there are things that they're not really supposed to say, and she tells you that you have photogenic ovaries. You have beautiful ovaries, and you sort of talk about how. And I think I don't know if it was in that same chapter but it was a little bit earlier, you sort of talked about looking at the other women in the waiting room and how there was certainly no clear, visible definition of what makes for an infertile woman necessarily, yeah. But that even still there, you didn't necessarily feel like a woman, you felt a bit like an imposter. So to go then now and... it was so lovely. You talked about how, by virtue of the fact that this woman could actually see inside and under the skin, that there was this shared secret that only the two of you had.
Wow.
Yeah. Beautifully
connected. And
well, you wrote it.
Sometimes I just write it out. I don't know why I'm writing it.
Yeah.
And then it connects at the end. And sometimes people can show it to me, after I put it down, and I think this is one of those moments.
Did you feel any less as of an imposter when she said you had beautiful ovaries?
First it just made me laugh because it's just so. I don't know. I think it's funny. It's like, well, you never hear people talk about your beautiful insides, maybe the ridiculousness of a situation. Here I am all paranoid about this butch thing, and I feel like an imposter, but I'm there, and got to go into these little rooms. But then this woman is looking, and I'm a lesbian, right? So it's this kind of moment of intimacy between two women where this woman's looking at me, but inside of me and saying, "You're beautiful inside," literally, right? And for these womanly parts, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think it also maybe touched on me too because, when I was growing up, I think I said this a bit in the book, but I can't remember. I was always very clearly a tomboy, and I think people were nervous about that, and they knew that was led to lesbianism or something, but I didn't know that. I had no idea about that. Mm-hmm. I just knew I was a boy, and so I think the nervousness, people always said to me, or said to my parents as compliments, "You're smart." That girl is very smart.
Yeah.
You know, that girl is very smart. But that's not what they say to little girls, right? They say they're very pretty. Oh, your girl is very pretty. That's what they say to little girls. And so there was some part of me that was aware of that, you know, kind of growing up with this, oh, people are saying something about me and it's in code and it has to do with me not being pretty. You know, it has, you know, it's this other thing. And I'm not saying that, you know, I do or don't think I'm pretty or whatever, but I think I had a complex about that, you know. I think I've had a complex about that. So, and I've written about that too. I have another story published, it's called Pretty, that's just all about that. So then to have all of that my whole life of people go, no, you're smart, you go with that, don't try the pretty thing, you're not going to be one of those married types, or I don't know. And then to be sitting there, right, you know, in this crazy situation with my legs open to a stranger, and having her tell me I'm beautiful, and you know these parts are beautiful.
It's funny too because you make a comment that, and I think probably every woman would agree to this, no matter how they identify, that that those technicians would benefit from a little lesbian hand-holding in terms of technique, what to do and what not to do.
Yes, I thought it was you know, it's a how-to book, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little risque, but I definitely think they should get some lesbians in there. You know, like why not? Did we deal with the
parts? we understand the mechanics.
We understand the mechanics.
You know, I have to say something I don't think I was expecting. And it shows up quite often in the book. It's a very sexy book. Like, you don't shy away. I mean, there are the mechanics, but you don't shy away from sex. And importantly, there's sex as in romance. There's sex in the connectivity between you and your partner, definitely. But no, there is a very, it's almost like the sex is understood to be part of the mechanics. So the fact that you felt as if you benefited were actually even like possibly like more psychically open to the idea of getting pregnant if you could be attracted to one of the technicians.
Yes, I that was a conscious decision on my part, because I feel like as I was reading or talking or reading websites or what have you, that it seemed like any question of infertility, whether it be for lesbians or for heterosexual women, was this very medicalized process that just felt, you know, as nice as people could be, because I had a very lovely doctor and wonderful, you know, ultrasound technicians and what have you. It still seemed like there's this level of, I don't know, what is it, the professional, the institution, the sterile, that we all have to kind of pretend that with this a professional experience, a professional exchange of goods and clients, you know. And I thought, you know, I don't like, you're having a baby, you know. I mean, how much more, you know, if that's not related to sexiness and desire and intimacy, then, you know, come on, how is that even possible? And I just thought, well, you know, there's this idea, like, if I'm a lesbian, I can't have fun doing it. I can't, you know, desire people. Like, I'm supposed to cut that away from me. I mean, I've never cut it away from other parts of my life. And this seemed pretty central to having a baby to, you know, anyway. So it was a very conscious decision to go, no, I want a book that does this, but with all the desire and with all of our, you know, messy bodies and stories and memories and everything that flashes in your eyes. Anytime you're with a lover, I wanted that to be part of trying to get pregnant. And
part of the fun that you don't shy away from either is that you have sexual encounters with men.
Yeah.
And so, and I mean, that kind of, what's that?
Spoiler alert.
Yes.
No. I give you a taste of that at the beginning, so.
You do, and it's interesting the way that it shows up throughout the book, and in part it's sort of attached to, and you mentioned this sort of feeling that that men and women can just actually sort of like, just by virtue of the act of sex, stumble into this secondary, result on the other side of pleasure, which is, oops, I'm pregnant. And yet, in your experience of, how hard could it be to find a man, and yet even that you found you had to struggle with a transaction, because it was never just going to be sex. If he was aware of the fact that you were trying to get pregnant, and then even in some of the other cases, it just never really quite worked out for one reason or another. And there you have it. You've had sex with a fellow, and he thanks you for your time, and he's out the door, and you're still no more pregnant.
Yeah.
But at least you had fun. It's funny, like
that's the thing.
Yeah.
You gotta have some fun, right?
Yeah.
It's a really hard thing. It can be a really terrible process for people. So you gotta find some fun in there too. There's so many things in what you said right now that I respond to. One person said to me after she read my book, she goes, "I can't believe you, I don't know, sacrificed yourself, what's the word, like you lowered your standards so much to have sex with a guy and go to bars and what have you, that you would endure that you would, what have you." And I thought that would, like, after reading the book, I thought that, well, even having the life of it, I mean, I thought the fertility clinics were much more invasive, and that was much harder to endure than, picking up a guy from a bar. And yet, somehow people read it the opposite way, and I thought, that's really interesting. In the bars, I finally felt like a lot of gay culture were in the bars, and I'm sorry that that's where, it's such a big part of our culture, but it is. So I'm comfortable in the bars. I feel comfortable if I can, make a plan and try to pick someone up and, romance them and bed them. That's totally, I felt back in control. I felt finally in control.
Yeah.
And the fertility clinic, that's not my land. And the whole, medical piece, even though, I mean, I have a PhD, but I still, before a doctor, before an MD, I all of a sudden feel like I'm 7 years old again, and I don't have a lot of power, and I'm scared, and what have you. And so anyway, I thought that was an interesting thing, because that's not how I experienced it. I experienced the fertility clinics as being much harder than the bars.
Well, you actually, you talk about how it sounds as if it was more of a betrayal when you showed up for your monthly appointment, and there was the one time when you had a different doctor, and you felt, and I believe rightly so, that, like, this is something that we're going through together. I have to psych myself up for this sort of thing, and there's this new person invading me and trying to it doesn't step into any form of the narrative as I've anticipated it. Whereas you say, again, in bars, you know exactly what you're getting yourself into. You know precisely how you want to experience it, and you did. You had complete control through all of those transactions.
That experience in a fertility clinic with the doctor switched. I mean, I don't remember how much I said, but after the fact, I was very clear, and I said, look, I understand you need to be able to take a day off. It's not like we can plan her vacation around my ovulation. It doesn't work out that way. And I believe everybody should have time off. But I needed to be told. That's what I said. I figured out what I needed in that moment. I just needed to be told so that I could prepare. And I mean, the reason I think it's important to point that out, because oftentimes when women ask me about the fertility clinics because they're there, probably the best advice given to me at that time was to not just submit, to not just do whatever they tell you, to be active in the decisions, to feel like you have a right to say yes, no. You say you want me to go in two times this month. I don't want to go in 2 times. I'm going 1 time, and it really took just remembering over and over again that was okay to not do what the doctor said, to maybe do something a bit different. And I think that really helped me. So I'd say that to other women out there. Just remember, you can still say no. This month, no.
Well,
That's
then
okay.
now I want to talk a little bit about how we characterize sperm. Because you were going through these profiles, and at one point you sort of joked, it's like, wow, it's like like, is every donor happy, like, outgoing and friendly, but part of this decision making and making choices, it sounds as if a large part of your frustration was going through this database that should have been sort of like seemingly endless. Like, how hard should it be to be able to, put together a checklist, and well, especially speak about things like, uh, because you really wanted a Mexican donor.
Yeah.
And you were coming up against a lot of Caucasians and Asians, and I speak a little bit about that because you felt as if maybe there was like a little bit of shaming, I think, at times on the part of some of the donors, that they weren't maybe as visible about that sort of thing.
Oh yeah. Oh, just to refresh my mind, I looked today
Yeah.
the list, and there seemed to be a few more people of color.
Mm.
Maybe they read my book and found some more guys.
Probably.
I don't know, but that's a good sign.
Mm.
Yeah, the thing to say is that you're Caucasian. So I notice even a lot of the Latinos will say they're Caucasian. Because we're mixed race people, it's always been up for grabs what people are going to identify themselves as. Mm-hmm. There's just very little sperm available to people in Canada. Mm-hmm. I heard a radio show about it, and it was like, I don't know, 100 something versus like 5,500 women that are looking. Wow. So you have 5,500 people that are looking. I don't know. It was a radio show I heard a couple years ago, so the number could have changed. But do you see what I'm saying? There's like maybe 100 to 200 potential sperm donors, and thousands of Canadians looking for people. And then when you don't want white sperm, there's hardly anything there. Yeah. So that's and I mean, the other thing I say in the book, which a lot of people are surprised about too, is that they don't accept queers. They don't accept guys who have slept with other guys. Yeah. And what wasn't it?
There's like there's a screening process, isn't it? Like, what is it? Something ridiculous, like 60 minutes or something, that they try and identify.
Oh, that changes depending on the clinic. But in terms of which sperm they accept at sperm banks, mm-hmm. It's the same as blood, I think. Okay. I think that's the way it is, and so you don't take men. But yeah, there's the other thing, that if it's somebody that you know, like if it's a friend, like at one point I had a friend mm-hmm. that I knew that I wanted to do it, then the clinic was, not the clinic I ended up going to, but the previous one had said that we would have to sit down, and I think they were going to determine whether or not we were actually a couple, Yeah. I don't think we had to be married, mm-hmm. but and there's no way we would pass as a couple unless, it puts us in ridiculous situations. Yeah. And it's people trying to, they're just covering themselves. They don't want anyone to get sick. They don't, what have you. But, you could be sick for all kinds of reasons. Yeah. And not just eliminate all the gay people, right? So, I don't know. That was pretty crazy.
Well, you, actually, that reminds me, I wanted to ask you, because, in the early stages, I think your hope was that it was going to be someone who was close to you, known to you. You at one point in the book you talk about how when you're going through these list of donors, it doesn't occur to you, to think whether or not they're like a goofy dancer. It's like how that sperm is actually socialized in the real world, and so clearly there's an attraction to the idea of getting pregnant by someone who is close to you, and after one very early disappointment with was it Mateo? Is that the? Yeah. You talked. I liked this. You talked about how you were going to have to sort of broaden the search to acquaintances. And I just assumed that the next thing would be that it was just basically you were just going to have to get more courageous and ask people that you know less intimately if they could help you in this endeavor. But actually, no, you decided to make them friends. You know, so to actually be a part of their lives long enough and actually build some friendships. And you had one particularly lovely friendship with a fellow in Buffalo who you would go to see monthly. I wondered if you could talk just a little bit about that, about how he wasn't really being auditioned, but how long was it before you actually sort of exposed your plan?
I think it was about, well, we spent like an intense kind of year together. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I felt, what is it? I mean, it's all the things that you do on a date with anybody.
Yeah.
You're trying to figure out, you know, do you want to share, well, not your life, in this case, your baby with this person, and is it going to work out? Is it going to be okay? Does this person like me? I mean, I would say that was a big difference between this, you know, sperm donors on a chart and the person in front of you.
Yeah.
I didn't care if the people on the chart liked me, but I don't know. I mean, I guess this is kind of animal instinct. You get a sense of the person, of whether they connect to your humor, your politics, whether you can laugh together, whether, you know, whether you have any kind of moral values that are similar, mm-hmm. You know. I don't know. All of a sudden, the list is really long when you're in front of someone, and yeah, I felt a little bit awkward about it too, though, because then I thought, oh God, he's going to think I just want him for that, and mm-hmm. I loved his friendship. Mm-hmm. So when it didn't work out, I just made, I don't know, all kinds of. Just wanted to be very clear with him that that was okay.
Have you managed to, have you sort of stayed in touch at all with any of the men who you approached in that sense?
I would say that, okay, one of them, we ended up not staying in contact, or no, we're in contact, but we're mad at each other. Okay. But not about the sperm.
Okay.
At least I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. No. And then another one, it really did affect our friendship, mm-hmm. that I had asked and that it didn't work out. And it was just actually this year that because I see him, you know, like yearly. And it's been more distant since then. And then this year I saw him, and he just gave me a big hug and said he missed me, and he felt that it had affected us, and he didn't want that to be the case anymore, which I was really happy about, because, you know, it was laying between us. It was, you know, all of the fears that I write down, they were true, because that often happens, right?
Well, so. It's interesting because you have to put so much of yourself out there. And it's clear in the book that, you know, you had to get used to the idea of sort of asking for help. I mean, this simply wasn't going to happen if you didn't continue to ask for help, which is why it's so lovely, of course, when ultimately what happens is two other people reached out to you and your partner.
That's true. I hadn't thought of that.
You know, and I mean, in the book you say, oh, could it actually have been as easy as that? But it's almost like you had to take this journey because, is it Gary is his name?
Yeah.
The donor is not on paper. I mean, other than the fact that you were looking for someone who was taller to sort of, you know, bring up the average between you and...
because of my Aunt Janie.
Yes. And but other than that, this was not sort of the ideal candidate, and yet everything that you had learned along the way pointed to Tammy and it's Tammy, right? Tammy and Gary.
Yeah, Tammy.
As, you know, not only a donor, but a couple who had watched what you were going through and just wanted to help. So that very simplistic transaction that you wanted in a very intimate and loving and fun and sexy environment, and you actually knew all the things that you wanted to know about another social being. They were kind, they were moral, they were caring. they in fact asked you the right questions. What would happen if you and Hillary were not around? And Gary stepped in and said, well, I would raise the child. And in that moment, you said it was the one piece of information that you don't think you would have thought to have sought, and it was just offered to you, and then there it is.
Yeah, it was really a beautiful moment.
And that's after how many years? Is this correct? Did you say you were trying to get pregnant for 15 years?
I don't think 15.
That feels dramatic. Yeah.
I mean, I think I started asking the first questions when I was 30, and then I got pregnant at 36.
Okay.
But it was in my mind, and we were playing with the idea since I was, 22 or something like that. But I didn't actively start until I was about 30.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it took a long time. Yeah, I think, I think the book is a bit of a study, too, on what we think we value in another human being, and ultimately in ourselves as well, and what our outlook is on the world. And, you were talking about how this might be different than someone who's straight and does not have fertility issues. I think that, if you're a lesbian, then, maybe you think more explicitly about what all those qualities you want in a person, because you're not in bed with them necessarily.
Right.
But I think probably heterosexual women are doing the same thing, but maybe not as explicitly or consciously. Mm-hmm. They're finding a lover, and is this a good man? Is this someone, and maybe they're thinking about it in terms of themselves, but maybe somewhere in the back of their head they're also thinking, is this someone that I would want raising a child? Is this, is this a good job? Does he have good health in his family? I think people are doing that unconsciously all the time. Mm-hmm. And maybe lesbians are doing it a bit more explicitly. And I think the book, and kind of in the life and going, trying out all of these different things, and, it takes apart that list. At one point somebody said at the end, they said, "Oh, you chose really well." And it's like, chose?
Yeah.
Do you call that a choice? That was an adventure. I don't know if it was a choice, but I think I chose to keep going. I chose to actively pursue this and to not stop and not get hung up by all of the barriers. But how much control over that list do we really have? Yeah. Doesn't the universe play tricks on us, or make us laugh or make us think differently? And in the end, I look at Gary, and he's such a good father, and he loves his daughter, and and he's lives near us, and he's all of these things that I don't think I could have ever read on a piece of paper. I wouldn't have known, or even found in a bar or anywhere. I couldn't have known any of that. It could have gone horribly.
Yeah. Well,
it's all. I feel like having a baby is one of those kind of animal things we do, and it's a lot of animal instinct. It's a lot of your guts in the room sitting with this person, and is this going to work out or not? Does this look good or not? And you don't even know all of the reasons why you're making the decision you are.
You say what you can't necessarily read on paper. I wanted to show you on paper my favorite part of the book, and I'm not going to lie, I'm not a crier, and I busted a tear. I hope this isn't backward. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
There she is. Because you do record throughout your visits to the clinic, the success, I suppose, and so wow, 9 pounds 7 ounces. Was that fun? Was it?
That's a whole other book right there.
Is it? I hope you'll write it. I seriously, How to Get a Girl Pregnant, Karleen Pendleton Jiménez. This is seriously it's a thrill to be able to congratulate an author on a book, but congratulations on your daughter. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. We'll talk again soon.
All right.
Bye.